to be talking about Asians in the 18th century with William and Mary and college company alumni Daniel Sieh. This is our first lecture that we've had, and we plan to have more, so stay tuned for that if you are watching this at home. And you missed this one, but you want to come later. So, yeah, without further ado, Daniel Sieh, a brief introduction on yourself.
Sure. So, as Matthew Velasco pointed out, my name is Daniel Sieh. I'm an alumni from the College of William and Mary. I graduated in 2016, and then for about 2 years I worked at Colonial Williamsburg, and then after that, those 2 years, I went to work for a small farm museum in North Virginia called Colonial Farm. They specialize in portraying the average life of the average person in Virginia at that time. So just one word, tobacco. Yeah, non-stop tobacco. And after that, I proceeded to go pursue my master's degree at American University, because getting my master's and undergrad at William and Mary would feel a little bit like academic incest. Yeah, ever so subtly, Cersei Lannister too much. So, part of my research right now is Asians in the 18th century. So when you think about the 18th century, oftentimes the general public just think drab colors, browns, tans, mud color, white people, black people, and that's it. People living and dying in their own towns and never leaving that. And that's very much the opposite. In the 18th century, you were going to have an already well-developed and globalized economy. You, as an average person in the 18th century in North America and England, will have access to goods from all across the world. And that's going to be all brought to you through these shipping lanes. And besides goods, you're going to have ideas, tastes, and even people have this cultural dialogue. It's not just one person talking to you, or you looking at them and then taking your own conclusion. It's going to be a cultural dialogue. It's going to be between two people. It's going to be a two-way street. So when we look at this is just a map that I was able to pull up showing all the trade routes that are going to be taking us between Britain, the 13 colonies, and all across the world done by the British East India Company. And we can see here that it's very thorough. It's going to be, not only is going to be the triangle trade between Europe, North America, and Africa, and the Caribbean over here, but also going to incorporate other elements, like the Indian subcontinent and even the Far East. So this is the area that I'm going to be focusing most from. Now, when you think of the revolution, we all think about the Boston Tea Party, right? And look at that. Tea is an Asian good, or at least I think it is, because I've not seen a tea plantation yet in Boston. So tea is going to be playing a major role in this 18th century era. It's going to be a symbol of status. It's going to be a good that everybody, from the elites to the lowest person, is going to be familiar with. It's going to be inspiring for. Here we have a wonderful tea set over here. Look how incredibly British it is. At the center, we have a Chinese good, tea. And everything that's going to be around it is going to be taking an increasingly significant role, because you have all these goods coming from Asia, and you just want to show off your wealth. Just like today, people don't change. Consumer goods don't change. Everybody likes to flaunt their bling. So that's going to come to just personal goods. Like this teapot over here. You want to make sure that when you put your tea out for your guest, they know you got more money than them. Same thing with this punch bowl. When you're partying out with your friends, you want to make sure that you have the right flex. And the perfect flex of this thing is a punch bowl. And these are all coming from China, because porcelain. Imagine yourself in Europe before the advent of porcelain. All you're stuck with is going to be very kind of stoneware jugs, and they're going to become very kind of boorish colors, browns, maybe greens, and then bam, suddenly you have this incredibly fine, incredibly durable, and also bright furniture like this. And you're going to be the famous person out there. Just like today. How many of us are going to get the latest iPhone just to show off? Same thing applies. And it's going to be a culture in continuum. It's not just the Chinese exporting porcelain. They're going to be aware that there's a market out there in England and in Europe. And this one is what are called a soft-paste porcelain, because Europeans really liked porcelain, but they couldn't quite figure out how to make that. So that's why it's called soft paste, because it's not quite as durable as actual hard paste porcelain from Asia. And this plate is an incredible example of something you find in England, because look at this. We have two people discussing, supposedly like this very picturesque scene in China that, you know, totally Asian people do, stand around near a vase, discussing this thing. And this is a vase here, and look at over here. I'm not sure if you guys can quite see it, but over here printed is the name of the factory in England that made this plate in particular, Bow. So basically it's saying, look at this. We make porcelain, even though it's kind of knockoff, so well that even Chinese people are looking at this saying, wow, look at that plate. Because we totally do that in Asia, right? Just walk around in Beijing, look at a magnificent vase and say, wow, look at that vase. I want that. And that's also going to apply to architecture. Now, this is part of Newsom House. It's in Leeds, in the UK. And everybody likes to decorate their house with a hint of exoticism, just to add a little difference in there, especially when you're trying to invite people over. Because remember, you're trying to look a little bit less basic. How many times of us have seen a live, laugh, love plaque in one of our friends' homes? And you just died a little bit inside, right? We want to be a little bit different than that. And that's why you're going to bring in all these exotic elements. How many of us also have been to other places as tourists or as students and brought back souvenirs from there? Same thing applies to here. And this one in particular, I think, is absolutely interesting because the wallpaper here is originally Chinese, painted silk. But the birds come from a series of watercolors by James Audubon called Birds of America. And the funny thing is that this part was part of a gift by the Prince Regent of England around 1800s, and was given to his lover. His lover thought, the wallpaper is fine, but needs a little boost. So that's why she just kind of cut out all the birds and glued them on top, just to get that little extra pizzazz. Apparently James Audubon heard about that. He was not very well pleased, and he proceeded to cancel her subscription to his Birds of America. Likewise, you're going to see this in textiles. You're going to be seeing silk everywhere. Everybody's going to be wanting silk because silk is awesome, plus it has a certain shine to it, and everybody knows that it's expensive. Just kind of that Gucci belt, yeah, same principle. This comes from Colonial collections. You're going to see this red silk damask. And it's also going to expand to female fashion in particular, that this two-piece gown, and all this floral prints are coming from India, in particular, like going to be out of cotton. You're going to probably be thinking, how come we can't grow cotton in America? Well, we grow a different kind of cotton. The cotton we grow in the South is probably going to be something called a short grain cotton. This one over here comes from India. It's a longer fiber, which makes it a bit more dense, sturdy, and also a little bit more breathable and finer. Just like today, for example, if you want the best cotton sheets, you buy them from Egypt, that kind of thing. Likewise, just because these goods are coming from Asia does not mean it's exclusive to the elite. We're going to be seeing this all across society. This is a case of a cotton neckerchief, and this comes from a really cool painting called Boston Shark. It's about a shark attack in Boston Harbor in 1778. Really cool, even though the shark is a little bit wonky. And here we have an example of an Indian export bird's eye dyed handkerchief. And here you see sailors, some of them, labor class, wearing imported goods from all across India. And this one is a very particular example that is my personal favorites. Now, this is an example of a dragon robe. These dragon robes are exclusive to the use of imperial Chinese court. This is an original one. They find it at Met right now. And these are symbols of office. These are uniforms by the court of China. They're incredibly symbolic. You can tell just by the dragons. The dragons dictate the importance of the person. 5 claws represent the emperor. 4 claws represent just nobility and princes. 3 claws and below are just average bureaucrats. And these dragons are all in 4 corners, symbolizing the four cardinal directions of the Chinese, mythology. And yet here we have an imperial Chinese robe that's been cut up and shaped into an 18th century men's banyan. Imagine a banyan in 18th century European fashion being very much like your bathrobe, a very casual wear. Look at this. We're seeing a formal Chinese attire modified and tailored to fit European fashion tastes. I'm not sure how he got his hand on this because this is exclusive to the Chinese court. It's like somebody stealing the president's suit and making that into his bathrobe, basically. I don't know how he got his hands on this, but it's an absolutely fascinating example because you can tell. Original, modified. They definitely cut up a couple of the pieces here, reduced the waist, and then got rid of the sleeves, restitched them, and then added a kind of waist belt here. Absolutely fascinating. And we're going to see furniture. Now, even though this looks like bamboo, this is not quite bamboo. This is made in England, and it's made out of solid wood. But if you notice the patterns here, filigree, is all meant to look like exotic bamboo. Today, it sounds really obnoxious to have bamboo furniture, but in the 8th century, it was the height of fashion. If you go to the governor's palace today at Colonial Williamsburg, you're going to find a similar set of furniture in the room of the daughters of the Royal Governor of Virginia. Likewise, you're going to see the use of lacquer all throughout the 13 colonies. You're going to have this Japanese cabinet imported all the way to England and then further modified by adding the stand. You see the top part, very clearly Asian. Finish, even with this myrtle pearl detail, that makes it meant to look like leaves. But the bottom, you can see, it's clearly European. So you have this kind of confluence between east and west, top and bottom, right there. And it's going to be also open to interpretation. This one is an example of a high chest coming from Boston, Massachusetts, all the way from 1720 to 1730. They can't quite get the right lacquer because they don't have the right chemistry in Boston, and also the same beetles too, to get the lacquer. But they're going to be using a similar style, and they're going to call it Japanning. Because remember, this comes from Japan, so this effect is going to be called Japanning. And this one is a bit more interesting because I was able to find a whole lot more about him. Unfortunately, he's going to have a very exciting stay in England. His name is Chitqua, but he's going to be called Chitqua in England because nobody can pronounce Asian names apparently. And this is painted by John Hamilton Mortar, dating from 1771, and it's currently at the Royal Collections. You can tell, Western medium, Western style, but Asian subject. And he's going to be a rock star in England. Absolute celebrity. He's going to go into England in 1751 to serve as a model. Eventually he's going to be making porcelain figurines, and he's going to be making them shaped like people, shaped like objects, and he's going to be making hordes of money. Each one of those figurines is going to be selling for about 10 to 12 guineas, which is an astounding amount of money. Like most laborers are only making about a guinea every couple of days or weeks. So 10 to 12 guineas each, that's still a lot of money. He's going to be invited to hang out with some of the most important people of the time period. He's going to be invited to hang out with the Royal Academicians of the Royal Academy, like Johann Zoffany, Mortimer, who else? He's going to be meeting the King and Queen apparently as well of England. Apparently they really liked him, thought he was interesting. He's going to be talking about acupuncture, medicine, Chinese plants, and apparently supposedly somebody thought he was so cool that he even transposed his name and into a book about Chinese gardening techniques, even though Chitqua never wrote about that as well. And in this painting here by Zoffany, I think is really interesting because they liked him so much they wanted to include him on this painting as kind of like the last minute addition. This is showing all the very famous artists of the 18th century. Like anybody in England this time is in this painting. All showing these premier artists discussing, art, sculpture. This guy over here. And look on the top left corner. You're going to find him over here. Kind of just tucked away. Looking all fancy. And unfortunately, what I meant by exciting visit is something that's an incident that happens on his way back to China. This is an ad that I found in the Gentleman's Magazine dating from October 1771. And this one is very interesting. I hate to read text to you guys, but this is very interesting. Mr. Chitqua, the ingenious Chinese artist, whose models after the life have been so justly admired, has been disappointed of a passage this year to his native country by a train of unfortunate circumstances. Having embarked on board the Greenville East Indiaman at Gravesend, he discovered that the common sailors were unaccountably prejudiced against him, owing, probably, to his strange dress and appearance. After this, he had only one day the misfortune accidentally to fall overboard and being saved from drowning by being buoyed up by his long, loose habit. After floating with the tide near half a mile, he was taken up half dead. This, the superstitious fears of the mariners, like those of Lang, the captain who, with the other officers, treated him with proper humanity, seeing his distress, offered to let him on shore at deal with the pilot, who might accompany him to London. This offer Mr. Chitqua thankfully embraced, and to London he came in the machine. But when arrived there, another distress befell him, could not recollect or express intelligibly where he lodged, and a mob gathering round the back of the coach began to abuse and beat the pilot for having, as they supposed, kidnapped a foreigner. So there you go. This guy, being dressed in Chinese fashion and robes, apparently spooked a bunch of sailors, fell overboard, and as if they proceeded to threaten him to throw him overboard again. You know, like anybody does. And after that, Chitqua begged the captain to let him go back to shore. The captain let him go, but unfortunately, the townspeople, when they saw him, thought the ship captain was kidnapping Chitqua, so they proceeded to beat him up to a pole. Fun times. Thankfully, there's a happy ending to the story. He was able to express that he was actually just a visitor. They let the captain go, and they got the next ship back to China. So, fun times for everybody. Now, this one is interesting as well because this is Huang Y Tong. It's going to be kind of like the second version of Chitqua in a way. After the trip by Chitqua, apparently word of his travels got back to China, and Huang Y Tong thought it would be a good idea for him as a young man to try his luck in England. And he's going to travel on the East Indiaman, Greenville, in 1773, and he's going to hit England, and he's going to be serving as a servant to the third Duke of Dorset, John Sackville. And apparently John Sackville liked him so much that he got Joshua Reynolds to make him a portrait. And we have the receipt for that too. And we know that John Sackville paid 70 guineas for this portrait. And the interesting part about it is that it's showing Huang Y Tong and basically the imperial Chinese robes for an imperial bureaucrat. But that's odd because we don't know if Huang Y Tong ever took the exams to be part of the imperial bureaucracy at all. And furthermore, he's really young. He's going to be only 19 to 20 when he gets to England. So it's very unlikely. And this is very interesting because this is part of an unpublished sketch by Joseph Nash. And it's stored right now at Knoll Hall. This has never been published before and never seen. And we can see that we have Madame Bucciarelli, which is going to be a mistress for the Duke of Dorset. But look at here. Look at this figure. That's going to be probably Huang Y Tong, but look at this. He's wearing that hat from before. But look at this. He's kind of matching some sort of European Western dress below that. So kind of interesting mix of cultures there. Probably just keeping the hat for the exoticism, just to make sure that John Sackville lets everybody know he's got an exotic servant and he's got money. Now this one is part of some of the latest research I was able to dig up. This is John Anthony. Now this sketch by George Younger has no title. But if you look at the British Museum archives, it'll list him as Huang Y Tong. But thanks to research between me and Mark McCarty at the Taylor Shop at Colonial, we're able to kind of deduce that it could not be Huang Y Tong. If you look at the kind of style of the collar, you can also see the waistcoat collar peeking out here as well. This tells us that this cannot be anything before 1795. And Huang Y Tong will go back to China in 1785. So 10-year difference. So there's no way this is Huang Y Tong. Instead, I think it's actually from somebody called John Anthony. And his story is very, very unique. He's going to be a native to China, as you can see by this parliamentary debates, volume 3, from 1812. He's going to be a native from China. He's going to be hired by the British East India Company to serve as a liaison for all of the Indian and Chinese sailors that the company is hiring. On top of that, he's going to be kind of vouching for them, in this case, by the Old Bailey. Old Bailey is a courthouse in London, and the record survived. And he gives us this very interesting snapshot. I'm employed by the Indian company to take care of the Lascars who come over here. I rent this house and employ Wing, which is one of the sailors that was hired by the Indian company, was accused of a crime. He's coming on behalf of him to take care of the house and of the men. He came to me at about 11 o'clock on the 10th of April and gave me the information. I have since been belonging to my brother. So basically, he's coming saying, don't worry about Wing. He's one of my employees. He didn't steal anything. It's all coming from the court records of the Old Bailey. And apparently, he applied for and was granted British citizenship in 1795. Now, unfortunately, we don't know more details about his life. He didn't leave any memoirs or journals. But apparently, he was such an important figure that after his death, all of the Chinese individuals who were living in town went to attend his funeral. And he was important enough that he got a little excerpt in the Gentleman's Magazine in August 1805, page 779. As you can tell, he is clearly important, and on top of that, it tells us that there's probably a significant Chinese presence in England in the 18th century, because not only are they hiring somebody to serve as a liaison, but they make enough of a fuss to all of them attend this one funeral. So, unfortunately, we can't say how many, but not in a significant amount. Now, another kind of Asian person who are making their impact are going to be Indian servants from the Indian subcontinent. And this is going to be a watercolor by Paul Sandy. It's going to be a servant of the Cumberland. You can see over here, Western dress, but still at the same time a turban. And they're going to be serving as enslaved people, unfortunately. And if you look at the language, this is a runaway ad from the Edinburgh newspaper, Caledonian Mercury, dating from 22nd of June, 1771. If you look at the language here, it's very similar to what you see in runaway ads by the Virginia Gazette describing runaway African Americans. And it's very interesting because they have the same language being used here for somebody that's clearly not African or European, but somebody who's entirely outside of that spectrum, an Indian. And it tells me that they're probably treated the same way, but at the same time considered separate from African enslaved people. And thankfully, I was able to dig up this portrait by David Martin of Sir Hector Murrow, the same person from this ad. And if you look at the back on the left, you see somebody here. Could this be Caesar, the guy that's mentioned in the ad? We don't know. There's nothing, no legends or captions to this. But based on his look, and based that it kind of matches the description from the runaway ad, there's a good chance it might be. Just something of an interesting thing. Somebody looking from the past to you, to us today, that was not meant to be passed on to history, but still managed to reach us today. And we're also going to see both genders as well represented in this. We're going to see this is the George Clive family by unknown artists. It's currently in Berlin, and it's showing the Clive family. They made their wealth from the British East India Company from basically exploiting India. Here we have an ayah, or a Hindu servant in this case. So you can see that she's kind of an interesting topic. She's at the same time at the center, but below the main action of the painting. So it kind of puts her at the center of the focus, but at the same time kind of in a subservient position from the Clive family itself. Just an interesting juxtaposition here. This is another kind of interesting portrait. It's a portrait gentleman by Arthur William de Visca, very famous artist here in the 18th century. Currently at the Yale Center of British Art. And clearly we can see that he is not only enjoying a hookah, but next to him there's an Indian servant as well in his full native garb. you see this kind of attraction to the east in British paintings before the 19th century. But this attitude seems to have changed after the Sepoy Rebellion, it seems like. And after that, the Indian topic seems to be kind of ditched and just occasionally brought back over again, just for the hint of exoticism. A fun fact about William Hickey, who is supposed to be the white gentleman portrayed in this painting, apparently he was one of the biggest customers of an Indian restaurant in London at that time. There was a restaurant that opened in 1765 in London that served Indian food, and it was opened by an actual Indian person. And William Hickey was one of the regulars there. And we're also going to see East Indians or Asians in the 18th century in Virginia. Now, unfortunately, I cannot get a kind of more information about them. I cannot say if they're going to be Chinese, Japanese, or Indians, just because in the 18th century they label every kind of Asian as East Indian Indians, which is not very descriptive. And also the fact that when they come over here to the West, they get issued lesser names. So for instance, the first one is Thomas Greenwich. Where does he come from? You know? Same thing from the one in the middle, Gene. It doesn't tell us a lot. Since they're being given Western names, we cannot tell what kind of descent they have or what kind of surnames they have. Because if I was given a surname from their native tongue, I'll be able to make a pretty good guess of where they're from. Because in kind of what parts of Asia you're from, you have a kind of surname. And they're all coming from Virginia, to no less. And this one, the bottom, from Philadelphia. So you can tell that they're here, but the problem is they're what we call to be invisible travelers. They don't leave their records. And the same problems you find with researching enslaved people in North America. They were ignored by scholars, ignored by people, and their opinions and perspectives were always constantly ignored and not being worthy to be preserved. So it leaves a lot of gaps in our knowledge, and it leaves a lot of kind of the silence. But thankfully to a couple of archives and a couple of research databases, we can kind of tell little glimpses of their lives based on the impact they create on the society around them. And it's also going to extend to Pacific Islanders. This is going to be Omai, who's going to be a South Sea Islander. So think about Polynesia at this time. He's going to be brought over by Captain Cook in 1776 to London. And this gentleman is going to be another rock star in London. He's going to be a very well-known traveler. He's going to have plays written about him. He's going to meet the King and Queen of England. He's going to have at least 4 portraits done about him. And a fun fact, look about his left hand. Notice the tattoos on his hand. Super cool there. And likewise, it's going to be kind of charming everybody. Now, people in England thought he was just very charming, but researchers today kind of surmise that he made a trip back to England with Cook because he's trying to get access to firearms. Because apparently he was a prince in Polynesia, he was trying to get firearms to get a leg up so that way he can go from prince to king. Pretty understandable motive. Now, I've talked a long time. I've talked a lot at you guys. I've thrown a lot of information. I'd rather talk with you as opposed to at you. So please let me know if you have any comments, questions, harsh criticisms, insults perhaps. And thank you for listening to me.
Was trade in East Asia supported by any of the East Asian powers, like the Chinese dynasties and stuff?
Yeah, they're going to be, the Japanese are going to be closing off their country after the Sengoku dies. So think about after the 1600s. There's going to be very little leaving Japan, and they're not going to be making a lot of stuff for the export market. Where we see a lot of stuff coming from is India and China. They're going to be making a lot of pieces exclusively for the export market. One of the fun things about this is that, let me pull up this photo. Remember this bow plate? It's English, but we're going to see the same thing done by the Chinese. We're going to be looking at Western porcelain, or like Western plates, Western portraits, and then kind of copying them on their own and then shipping it back to England. Is it going to be something called bespoke porcelain, really? So let's say you're somebody that's incredibly wealthy in England or somebody incredibly wealthy in Virginia, and you want to just give a little extra to your china. You're going to contact the agent in London. You're going to request, I want to have a a set of porcelain done to have my family craftsmen there. Have this color, this color, this color. And it's going to go all the way to Canton through an agent who's going to contact the porcelain makers in Canton, who's going to then make the porcelain and then ship it back to you. Apparently, though, there were some issues in translation. So anytime there's a sketch that had the label red in there, they just literally wrote red and called it a day. Fun stuff. Yes?
So did Omai actually get his guns?
He did not. Unfortunately, he went back to Polynesia, 1776, 1777, and he died 2 years later to disease. Sorry, no Polynesian guns. Questions from Ron?
Do you know anything about the fashion tattoos after Cook's voyages to the Polynesian area?
I do not. That's another area of research entirely. That's probably something that's going to be done by somebody else that's probably more narrow than I do. But apparently it was kind of a fad in England at that point too to get tattoos.
I know a little bit about it actually.
Questions?
Is there any like intersection of ideas? Or do you see people in China reading European philosophers and English people reading Chinese philosophy?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Mr. Huang Y Tong, when he went to England, he got to talk to a bunch of philosophers, and they thought it was so cool that they asked him in 1785 when he went back to China to send back some Confucian texts. Apparently, they also asked him to translate them from Chinese to English, but he never got around to it. But we do know that a couple of the things got back to England because Michael Shen-Fusang was able to go to Cambridge or Oxford University and help start translating a couple of the Chinese kind of scrolls they already had in their collections. So that's the beginning of their Chinese collections right there in 1687. They were definitely aware of Chinese philosophies like Confucianism and Buddhism. As a matter of fact, in 1765, I was able to find a Virginia Gazette editorial writing about what used to be a gentleman. And in them, they mentioned the Chinese philosophies and saying, we suffer the Chinese their good habits of judging a man and giving him power based on his character, which is a kind of reference to the imperial Chinese system of examinations, where somebody to join the imperial system, you have to first pass a test, both mental and physical, then you'll be given a government office. And saying, we suffer the Chinese for their good habits, but we are quick to copy the latest French foppery, which is a very, very English thing to say. So basically saying like, yeah, we should probably copy the Chinese, but no, we're too quick to copy the French. Those darn French. Paraphrasing these. Yes, question.
What, during your research, what surprised you the most?
I was kind of surprised that I would even find documentation about this, primary sources no less. There's kind of like two inherent challenges. The first challenge is things survive to us today. We all know that as historians, not everything survives to us today due just to circumstance, or just preservation, or just bad luck. Same thing applies to Asian documentation. There's World War II and the Cultural Revolution. The amount of documents that were purged during this decades is phenomenal, it's enormous. And the loss of humanity is very much felt. On top of that, if you think about it, a lot of stuff we find is going to be in English. And a lot of travelers, when they travel, are not going to be making notes, or you're not going to be writing or saving a lot of your receipts or documents. And if they ever get saved, it'll be in Chinese or the native languages and then brought back to their countries of origin, who then got lost or didn't survive. So I suspect that you can get a little glimpse of just them in general is astounding, I think.
It's all into the Dutch or the French in the Southeast Asia, the big in like Vietnam, Malaysia, and such. Yeah.
French are going to be coming force into Southeast Asia more towards the late 19th century. But the Dutch in particular will be present very early on. They're going to be making a huge splash, in particular in Japan. It's something going to be called Rangaku, I believe. I'm probably butchering this, but it's going to be called basically Dutch studies. The Japanese thought they were so interesting that imagine like you're living in Japan all your life, so you have somebody from across the globe offering you all these different new things. So you're going to be reading Dutch medicine texts, Dutch medical books. They're going to be looking at gunpowder manufacturing, gun manufacturing. They're particularly fascinated about the Western crafting of armors. They take one look at Western armors and say, wow, this stuff is great. We need to make this stuff now. For Chinese stuff, like the effect of Western political thinking in China, I did some research on that. I couldn't really come up with that because I probably didn't create much of a splash. Because if you look at China in 1776 and 1790, during this period of instability revolutions in Europe, China is actually going through a period of incredible stability and prosperity. So everything is going fine. You really want to rock the boat? I saw a hand there. Yes.
Obviously, you're looking mostly through English and Western sources. What primary sources exist from Asia itself, China, India, etc.?
That's a good question. That's still a work in progress. I'll have to dig up a couple watercolors here and there, but I didn't want to present them yet because I don't think I've got enough information across them enough to be able to put them into this cohesive narrative, or at least this rambling that I put up there. The problem is that the fact that, especially with Chinese documents, the government is very kind of touchy about that kind of stuff. And also, if you even dare talk about Chinese culture, they might get very touchy with that, and they might kind of hijack your research and kind of make it political. They have the tendency to kind of rewrite history. Because, nothing happened in Tiananmen Square, right? Sorry, I promise it's as political as it gets.
Was there, how widespread was printing in China, for example, at this time?
Very common. They're going to be, the printing press was known for centuries at that point. They're going to be printing text, just woodblock prints. As a matter of fact, they're going to be looking at Western prints and then copying them into Asian fashion, basically. There's an example of a French plate of a bunch of ladies playing instruments in this very kind of Arcadian scene. And the Chinese are going to say, oh, that looks cool. And they copied that, but they just changed the French ladies to Chinese ladies. That's all.
So you talk about how in these runaway ads that they speak about people of the East Indies in a period term as they speak of them as different yet the same as Africans, enslaved Africans. But you also see Chinese people in English universities. Was there essentially like a hierarchy of like how like Europeans saw Asians like, oh, these Asians are better than other Asians?
That's a good question, and from what I've seen so far, there seems to be a slight hierarchy, but it depends mostly on the circumstance of how they come to the West, basically. So, for instance, remember Chitqua, the modeler that came to England? He was treated with pomp circumstance because he came in as an actual professional with funds and actual government backing as well. But for people, let's say like Caesar, who was an enslaved Indian by Sir Hector Munro, he gets brought over as an enslaved person, so he's going to not get any of that treatment at all. So I think it's kind of just very depending on how you come to the West in the first place. The back, and then you, Dr.
So I have kind of a comment and then a question. So can you go back to the Banyan?
Sure. The dragon robe one?
Yeah. So in the tailor shelf, we interpret that Banyans are casual, but not like your bathrobe casual, more like designer hoodie casual, which I think is
that's a better
which is a really interesting kind of reframing of this as like high fashion cultural appropriation in a way that's really similar to some modern stuff in the current high fashion scene. So I just thought that was really interesting how this sort of happened. So
yes.
It's not like this garment is something someone's going to be sitting around in their house in their pajamas in. You might go to the horse races or to the coffee house in this, and people are going to see you in this and think things about it and fashion. Anyway, that's my kind of comment about that. I have some people on the internet who want to know if they're going to be able to find this research anywhere to read about later.
It's on my Facebook right now. I'm trying to get it published at one point or another, but if you have any questions, send them to me.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to answer the questions because of no social life.
Cool. Awesome. I'll tell them that.
Also, I do want to make this for myself one day. I want to
That would be dope. This is killer.
Yeah,
I'll be fabulous. No one ever saw my glow. Yes, question.
I was wondering, you're talking about like circumstantial property of birth, if skin color had anything to do with it, because it seems when you're talking about like the Indians, they seem to be more in a servant position, whereas like the Chinese were more like revered, and skin color was.
That's the thing. They always refer to them as East Indians, but East Indians can refer to anybody from India, China, or Japan. They just refer everybody to who's Eastern as East Indian, blanket term. So when they talk about this, we really don't know if they're actually Indian or Chinese or anything. We know they're Asian, but we don't know what kind of Asian they are. So just keep that in mind when we talk about that. Skin color, I don't think will play as much of a role yet, but that's going to change very rapidly with the advent of the 19th century. That will, that happens.
Just something kind of to add on to that, and maybe something you've been looking through in your research too.
Sure.
Having looked at way too many runaway ads for any one sane person. One thing you often do see as well is they will describe somebody as a yellow Negro. So it kind of implying that they have some kind of Asian, or they're presumed at least to have some kind of Asian ancestry. Often those people are coming from what they would call the West Indies, the Caribbean, where you're seeing a little bit kind of mixing of cultures there.
I think you might be referring to just mulattoes or mestizos, as you know,
Right.
in Hispanic culture.
Right.
perhaps.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is sometimes it's hard to tell, like Daniel was saying, like, who are they actually trying to describe here? Or do they themselves even know?
And that's another big problem that I have with my research. I get a ton of false positives because if I try to put Indian in, it pulls up the ship category of merchant ships, basically. If I put Indian, well, they also refer to Native Americans as Indian, so that helps. That's helpful. And if I put East Indian, it just pulls up a bunch of ads for porcelain and tea, which is fine, but I was looking for people. So I get 2,000, 3,000 hits on the database. I'm like, well, great. I have to go manually sort them out now. This is my life.
Just want to point this out. That's how I feel about the word servant in the 18th century.
Yeah, because everybody ends their letters, your humble servant. You're like, come on. Give me a break here. Work with me, people.
Victimize you personally.
It really was. They're cruel.
Any more questions? I promise we have all day. Or at least I have all day. Maybe you don't.
This is maybe not the most appropriate thing. Can we get dinner with us, by the way?
Sorry. I think I'll see you here for a little bit longer, though.
Good. Cool. Awesome.
All right.
I think that's everything.
That's it.
All right. So thank you, Dan, for the talk will be on Facebook.